they polled different Americans on their views on reparations for slavery. Latinos, Arabs, they went to everybody. Most people are not for it. Most people, Latinos are not for it. Asians, no, very few people support reparations for blacks, which makes sense because they don't value black life. But from where I'm sitting, why are you asking Chinese what they think about the slavery you put me through? Why are you asking Arabs and East Indians and Latinos who are not enslaved in America what they think about this? This is between the U.S. government and African people. This does not involve Chinese, Arabs, Jews, or well, Jews it does because they participated, but it doesn't involve Chinese, Arabs, East Indians, Latinos, Mexicans, or nobody else. Why are you asking them? You know why they asking them? Is it realistic to expect politicians to do something beneficial for a disorganized constituency? I have two answers. On the one hand, I would say yes. Because if you are a sincere freedom fighter for your people, if you really sought office to improve the conditions of African people, whether they are organized or disorganized, you should struggle for them. You know, I look at Dr. King, I look at Malcolm. They were not politicians, but they struggled for their people. I look at Coleman Young, the mayor of New York City. I look at Adam Clayton Powell, U.S. congressman from New York. Their people were disorganized, but they still struggled for them. Harold Washington out of Chicago, he still struggled for them. So I don't think it is I cannot accept the excuse that the reason I'm not serving my people is because they're not organized enough to finance my campaign or protect me from ridicule and slander from white folks who will see my work on behalf of the community as a threat. I cannot accept that because a man should be a man at all times. It's just like when people ask me about Barack Obama, they say, well, what could he have done? He could have spoke up to your conditions. That's what he could have did. At the end of the day, are you a man or are you not? Period. Because a man is going to do what's right all the time, not just when it's beneficial or convenient for him. My other answer, is it realistic for black people to expect a politician to do for them if they're not organized and don't finance the campaign? It's not realistic at all. We do not have the type of black men and women in public office we had 50, 60, 70 years ago. We don't have them anymore. We have people who are self-serving, very scared of white folks, and they are not willing to stick their neck out for black people at all unless they're sure that neck can come back to them. So I think black people have better recognize that, understand that. And to some extent, I'm a little defensive of the politician from the perspective of why should he or she risk it all for a group of people who doesn't value them enough to come together, organize, and finance what's going on. In order for electoral politics to be beneficial for African people, we have to organize and we have to weaponize our money and our votes until we select who we want to represent us and finance their campaigns. Black elected officials will never benefit black people. Never. You'll never get black people in office to do the job we need them to do until we select them and finance them ourselves. But that's a conversation we don't want to have because black people are not interested in becoming economically responsible in the interest of their liberation. We will pray, we will march, we will vote. But don't you ever ask me to use my money for the collective best interests of black people. We don't do that. That is our eternal weakness, and that is why we are so effectively exploited financially by other groups. The black dollar is the easiest dollar to get in America because it is not partial to the man who owns it. The black dollar is colorblind. No other dollar in America is colorblind. The Jewish dollar is racist. The Arab's dollar is racist. The Latino dollar, the Anglo-Saxon dollar is racist. The Native American dollar is racist. What I mean by that, their money is partial to their community and does not like to touch the hand of anyone outside that community. But the black dollar, easiest dollar to get. It is not partial. It is not racist. It is not biased to black people. How can your money not be partial to your interests? That is insane. But that is exactly why we're dealing with economic devastation in the black community.
Please talk about how the immigration laws passed in Florida will impact the economy and African-American employment.
The immigration situation, in my opinion, currently is being pushed by the white power structure because they want to use the immigrants to replace black people. I've been saying this for about 5 years, maybe even longer. But when Joe Biden said when he got elected that he wanted to fast track 4 to 8 million illegal immigrants to American citizenship as quickly as possible, I believe that was the writing on the wall then. The Democratic Party is tired of depending on black people's votes. They're tired of being painted as the black party because they're not. They don't care about blacks, but they have to act like they do at election time to get those votes. So what are they going to do? We've got the Ukrainians, we got the Afghanis, we got the illegal Mexicans. We also have the South American migrants coming in, and we're going to try to fast track them to citizenship as quickly as possible before November of 2024. So we don't have to rely on the black vote as much. We can now go after the migrant vote. That's what's happening. Why would the federal government allow the governor of Florida to fill up buses full of migrants and drive them halfway across the country to Chicago? Why would the federal government allow the governor of Texas to fill up coach buses full of migrants and planes full of migrants and fly them to New York City? These are the two most crowded cities in America. They don't even have any space left, but you're allowing Florida and Texas to drive migrants halfway across the country to New York and Chicago. And then when they get to New York and Chicago, you tell the black mayors of New York and Chicago, Mayor Eric Adams and Mayor Brandon Johnson, that you're going to use your budget, black people's tax dollars. You're going to use that money to find emergency housing, medical care, shelter, and social services for these people. The homelessness rate in America is the highest it's been since the 60s. There are at least 30,000 homeless blacks in New York. There's at least 20,000 homeless blacks in Chicago.
Got to mention Philly, bro.
Philadelphia leads the nation, percentage-wise in Philadelphia, leads the nation in homelessness. But we don't have the migrant crisis yet as bad. We have migrants, but it's not as bad as Chicago and New York. Is it a coincidence that they're sending all these migrants to these two congested cities because these are the two biggest black voter blocks in the country? They're the two most socially and politically conscious black groups in the country. And because we don't want to answer to black people and we don't want to be accountable to black people, we're going to liquidate the Negroes out of New York and Chicago and turn these cities into migrant centers. That is exactly what they are doing. The same schools that they said they could not afford to operate in Chicago are operating now as 24-hour homeless shelters for migrants. If you didn't have the money to operate this school from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., how did you find the money overnight to operate the school 24 hours a day as a migrant shelter? Totally unacceptable.
Also recently, can you speak about the situation where the judge dismissed the case for the Tulsa reparations?
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, the oldest living survivors of the 1921 Tulsa race riot had their petition for reparations thrown out in Oklahoma. 3 points I want to make on this. Number one, this was an insult to African people everywhere. It was an insult to our ancestors who were murdered in Tulsa during the Black Wall Street Massacre of May 1921. And it was an insult to those elders who are still living 100 years after that situation took place to not get any form of restitution for themselves or their ancestors. 3 points. Point number one, the reparations movement is gaining momentum. It's gaining momentum. Because it's gaining momentum, the government doesn't want to feed it in any way by acknowledging reparations for any of the massacres that took place in American history. In other words, slavery was the biggest massacre. That may one day see the Supreme Court. Reparations for African people may one day see the Supreme Court. If we give reparations to Tulsa, or reparations to Rosewood, or reparations to Wilmington, North Carolina, or reparations to Charleston, South Carolina, for those Black Wall Streets that we destroyed, are we not setting a legal precedent upon which an argument for reparations for slavery could be made to American Africans living in this country. I believe a decision was made at the top of the power structure that case had to be thrown out, because if they get reparations for what we did to them in Tulsa, we're going to have to give reparations to black people for what we did to them in slavery. That's number one. Number two, I think it is also a test to see how black America reacts. They want to see how we react to Tulsa to gauge our seriousness on how we would respond if they strike down reparations in America. Because I believe there's a strong chance they're going to strike it down for black folks. So they want to get a gauge on our reaction to how we would respond if they say we're not giving out any reparations. Because there was a poll that went out. And the poll that went out, it's a couple months ago, they polled different Americans on their views on reparations for slavery. Latinos, Arabs, they went to everybody. Most people are not for it. Most people, Latinos are not for it. Asians, no, very few people support reparations for blacks, which makes sense because they don't value black life. But from where I'm sitting, why are you asking Chinese what they think about the slavery you put me through? Why are you asking Arabs and East Indians and Latinos who are not enslaved in America what they think about this? This is between the U.S. government and African people. This does not involve Chinese, Arabs, Jews, or Jews it does because they participated, but it doesn't involve Chinese, Arabs, East Indians, Latinos, Mexicans, or nobody else. Why are you asking them? You know why they asking them? America wants to make sure the immigrants are on their side. So when they say we're not giving black people reparations for slavery, it'll look like it's a national decision that this would not be good for the country. And I believe Tulsa was just the first step towards the U.S. government striking down a fight for reparations. I believe reparations is going to end up in front of the Supreme Court, and more effectively, I think it may need to end up at the International Criminal Court of Justice, the Geneva Convention, and on the main floor of the United Nations. I don't think it ends in America.